Hi everyone, welcome to week 7. For week 7, we're going to start to look at some of the instability in our economy, some of the expectations, and the role of international trade, which is very important to evaluate. The international sector is very important to the U.S. economy because it can create a lot of potential for economic growth. The challenge that we're facing in the U.S. is we have a very large trade deficit. And the reason for this trade deficit is we're exporting more than we're importing into our economy. Given that we're importing more than we're exporting. So given that we have more of these imports, it creates a strain on the economy. And one of the strains that it creates is how to deal with this extra amount in terms of resource allocation. And you'll notice that the U.S. economy has to focus on how to lower the trade deficit. The trade deficit is very important. When you look at a trade deficit that's growing, that can say a lot about an economy. So when a trade deficit is present, like it is in the U.S., you could see that labor costs are very high. You also could see that we have a potential for less jobs being created. And we have less jobs being created, we're going to depend on other countries to make the impact. And that's a very big issue that our economy is facing. So we want to be able to produce more. And when we can produce more, that'll create more opportunities and it'll reduce the trade deficit. So for this week, you have the discussion. The discussion for week 7 is the following. You're going to go to the internet, find a news article that discusses balancing the federal budget, summarize some of the key points, and focus on having an in-text citation and reference to support your work. So for this week, you're going to look at trading and how trading occurs. And when you look at trading, you can have either absolute advantage or you can have a comparative advantage. When we look at absolute advantage is very important because absolute advantage is where a country is able to produce more given their resources. When you look at comparative advantage, they're able to do it at a quicker pace. And when you look at this quicker pace, it's very important to evaluate. So we want to focus on an economy that has potential. And when we look at potential, you want to start at how an economy is able to grow. An economy is able to grow with many different factors. One of the factors that we want to focus on is how can an economy or a country gain a comparative and absolute advantage. It's very tough. An economy is able to get a comparative advantage if they can be more productive with their resources. And that's very important to evaluate when you're more productive with your resources. When you look at absolute advantage, a country that's larger could take advantage of that as well, which could create opportunities. When we look at this graph right here, you have one country right here, you have another country right here. Saudi Arabia, United States. You'll notice that Saudi Arabia produces more oil compared to the U.S. However, the U.S. produces more corn compared to Saudi Arabia. When we look at this, the U.S. has a absolute advantage in corn production, where Saudi Arabia has an absolute advantage in oil production. That doesn't mean that they should trade based off of that. What that's telling you is that one country is much larger in their resources. And when we look at that, that's very important to see. When you focus on comparative advantage, that's what trading should be based on. Trade should be based on who can do it better than the other country. There's some examples here, but we want to look at intra-industry trade. Now, you want to look at inter-industry trade between where the U.S. exports. When you look at this, you notice Canada gets a lot of U.S. exports. You notice we import a lot from the European Union and from China. Now, the reason why the U.S. exports so much to Canada is the high cost structure. It's much easier for them to ship many of the goods to Canada, given that it's very expensive to produce in the U.S. You'll notice that when we look at where or what we produce, you'll notice that Capital goods, which are machines, is the quantity of many of the exports. Now, with regard to imports, you'll notice that consumer goods and industrial supplies are a bulk of what we bring into the country. So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at with regard to comparative advantage and absolute advantage in international trade this week. If you have additional questions, let me know, but I look forward to your effort.